What if I told you the last living member of the Fellowship went somewhere no dwarf had ever gone before, and that Tolkien left us only fragments of what happened after? This is the story of Gimli, son of Glóin, and his final, mysterious voyage to the Undying Lands. Before we journey further into the story, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would help us bring more tales from Arda to life. Now, let's return to the story. Gimli was no ordinary dwarf. He was sturdy and stubborn, fierce in battle, yet soft in heart for those he called friends. We remember him in the dark, echoing halls of Moria, where he faced the horror of the Balrog and yet never faltered. We remember him under the skies of Gondor, where he stood shoulder to shoulder with the men of the West, defending Minas Tirith from the shadow of Mordor. And we remember his laughter, sometimes rough, sometimes surprisingly gentle, that followed the company from Rivendell to the gates of Mount Doom. But what happened after the War of the Ring? Tolkien gives us only a glimmer, a brief note in The Return of the King. When Aragorn, the king, passed beyond the circles of the world, it is said that Legolas, the elf who had journeyed from the woodland realm of Mirkwood, built a ship. And with it, he took Gimli, a dwarf, whose kind had never set foot upon those western shores, to sail across the seas to Aman. The ship carried with it not only wood and sail, but a friendship so profound it had reshaped centuries of enmity between elves and dwarves. So why was Gimli allowed to enter Valinor, a land forbidden to all mortals save the greatest of grace? People have speculated. Some say it was the bond with Legolas, forged in fire and battle, a friendship so enduring that the Valar themselves may have smiled upon it. Others believe it was his devotion to Galadriel, whom he admired with a reverence deeper than any dwarf had ever shown an elf. Galadriel, the Lady of Lorien, had once gifted him a strand of her hair, a token he treasured more than gold. And perhaps such devotion did not go unnoticed by the powers of Aman. Whatever the reason, the result was unique. Gimli became the only dwarf in all of history to gaze upon the Undying Lands. To imagine Gimli there is to imagine wonder itself. A dwarf accustomed to carving halls from rock, seeing light unfiltered by shadow, witnessing trees and rivers and mountains in forms untouched by corruption. It is a journey not only of distance, but of transformation, a symbol of reconciliation, of bonds that bridge ages of mistrust. In his passing, he carried with him the enduring hope that even the smallest hands can leave a mark upon history. The voyage west was unlike any journey Gimli had ever known. The seas of Middle-earth were familiar, tempestuous, restless, a mirror of the mountains he called home. But the waters leading to Aman were different. They shimmered with an otherworldly light, neither sun nor moon, and the air carried a softness, a weightless quality, as though the world itself had exhaled centuries of sorrow and pain. Gimli stood upon the deck, axe at his side, feeling the strange calm settle into his bones. Beside him, Legolas's eyes, ever luminous, traced the horizon with a quiet joy that dwarves rarely understood, but could not help admire. In those days, the dwarf and the elf spoke little of old grudges. The long history of enmity between their peoples, the quarrels over stone, over mines, over pride, seemed small, almost petty, compared to the vastness of the seas stretching before them. Instead, they shared memories of their adventures, the fall of Moria, the terror of Shelob's lair, the night skies over Ithilien. Gimli's laughter, deep and rumbling, echoed across the waves, mingling with the whispering wind. And sometimes, in the quiet, he would simply watch Legolas, marveling that this creature of unearthly grace had chosen to journey with him, a simple dwarf from the mountains, to lands neither had ever seen. The shores of Valinor, when they appeared, were unlike anything Gimli had imagined. White beaches stretched beneath silver-leafed trees, their leaves shimmering in a light that felt alive. The mountains rose like sculpted marble, crowned with green and gold, and the air was filled with a soft, harmonious music, neither sung nor played, but woven into the very world. Gimli's heart, so often armored against grief and battle, trembled. For a dwarf whose life had been carved in stone and shadow, this light, this openness was breathtaking. He walked among halls that gleamed with craftsmanship beyond any he had ever known. Yet the work was not dwarven. It sang with a different beauty, one that celebrated creation itself. Even in Aman, Gimli remained mortal, and he knew it. He walked with Legolas along the shores, discussing wonders in quiet tones, reflecting on lives lived and friends lost. Aragorn, Gandalf, Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, names that still carried weight in his heart. He spoke of Galadriel, of Lothlorien, of the forests that had been a sanctuary in times of darkness. And in return, Legolas spoke of the forests of Valinor, of gardens tended by unseen hands, of the history of the elves, both joyful and sorrowful. In these conversations, Gimli's respect for his friend deepened, and perhaps for the first time, he felt that dwarves and elves might truly understand one another. The years passed gently, marked with quiet reflection rather than clamor. Gimli tended gardens with skillful hands, finding joy in shaping beauty instead of stone for battle. He explored hidden glades and silver-lit halls, always with a sense of wonder, never of ownership, a lesson in humility and awe he carried from his old life in Middle-earth. And though time touched him, he moved through it with dignity, savoring each moment, each sunrise and gentle wave, each song carried by the wind. In this way, Gimli's story became more than a tale of adventure. It became a testament, the last of the Fellowship, a bridge between races long divided, living out his final years in peace, carrying the memory of all he had loved, and leaving behind a legacy of friendship and reconciliation that even the mightiest histories could scarcely capture. Even in the Undying Lands, Gimli knew that his time was not infinite. The soft light, the endless forests, the halls of marble and gold, none could grant him the eternal life that the elves enjoyed. Mortals, no matter how favored, walk the world only for a while. And yet, for the first time, Gimli did not fear the passage of time. Each day became a gift, each moment a jewel to treasure. He walked beneath the silver trees, listening to the songs of the world, and felt something deep stir within him, a quiet contentment, a sense of belonging that no forge, no mountain, no hall of stone had ever given. In the evenings, he would sit beside Legolas upon cliffs overlooking serene bays, watching the sun's light turn to gold on the waters. There, he thought of the dwarves' ancient beliefs, that upon death, their souls returned to Mahal, Aule, the smith, their maker. To them, death was not an end, but a homecoming, a restoration to the hands that had first shaped them. Gimli felt the truth of this deeply. All his life, he had been a craftsman, a builder, a warrior, a friend. And now, in the quiet embrace of Aman, he felt the final shaping of his spirit, as if the world itself was returning him to the hands of the great smith, who had first breathed life into his people. He thought of his companions, those who had walked the long road with him. Frodo, who bore burdens he could scarcely imagine. Aragorn, whose heart had carried the weight of kingship and hope. Legolas, who had crossed the seas to guide him to this land. And the memory of Gandalf, who had always seen the spark of courage even in the smallest of hearts. Gimli's thoughts were never heavy with grief. Rather, they were warm, like embers glowing in a hearth, a reminder of friendship, loyalty, and the bonds that shape lives beyond measure. Symbolism threaded through every step of his journey. Gimli, a dwarf who had once been suspicious and wary of elves, now walked beside Legolas in a land forbidden to most mortals. Their friendship, forged in fire and shadow, had become a bridge, a living testament that old enmities could be healed. Gimli carried with him the memory of Middle-earth's sorrow and triumph, a reminder that even the smallest among us can affect change, can shape history, can embody hope. And in that, perhaps, lay the greatest gift a man could offer, a life in which the heart is free to honor all that came before, and yet to marvel endlessly at the beauty that remains. We can only imagine Gimli's final days, wandering glades untouched by shadow, listening to unseen waters singing through the land, sharing laughter and stories with Legolas, learning songs in languages he had never known, and feeling at last that the long journey of his life had found its quiet peace. When he passed beyond the circles of the world, as all mortals eventually must, it was not with sorrow, but with the fullness of a life richly lived. The axe that had fought so many battles, the hands that had carved stone and friendship alike, rested finally, at ease. Gimli, son of Glóin, last of the Fellowship to leave Middle-earth, had crossed a threshold that none of his kind had before. In doing so, he became more than a dwarf, more than a warrior, more than a friend. He became a symbol of reconciliation, of wonder, and of the quiet courage it takes to embrace the unknown. And as the silver light of Aman washed over him, one can almost hear the echo of his laughter, deep and warm, a sound that will linger in the world long after all else fades. Gimli's journey to the Undying Lands was more than the tale of one dwarf's final voyage. It was a story of bridges built across centuries of mistrust, of hearts opened where once there was only suspicion, and of courage that carried a small figure through shadows and fire to a land of unimagined light. He, who had delved into the deepest halls of stone, who had faced terror and darkness in Moria, had now walked in a world of living beauty where shadow held no sway, and the songs of creation were visible in every leaf and ripple of water. Even as mortals, Gimli and Legolas shared something extraordinary, a life lived in awe and wonder, a testament to the bonds that endure beyond the reach of time. Gimli's presence in Aman was a quiet miracle, a gift of grace that reflected not just his deeds, but the choices he made, the loyalty he offered, and the love he carried for friends and for the world itself. In the soft light of that land, a dwarf could finally see the world not in stone and metal alone, but in color, in melody, in light unbroken by shadow, and in doing so, understand something of the eternal that had eluded him all his life. We can imagine him wandering the white shores, axe at his side, marveling at gardens beyond imagining, listening to the whispers of trees older than mountains, sharing quiet moments with Legolas, exchanging stories and laughter that had grown richer with the years. And when the end came, as it does for all mortals, it came not as a grief, but as a homecoming. Gimli's spirit returned to Mahal, to the hands of Owl the smith, the forge of his people, carrying with it the light of Aman, the memory of friendship, and the enduring echo of courage. In this, there is a lesson for all who wander the long road, that even the smallest heart can leave a mark upon the world, that bonds between the most unlikely companions can endure beyond battle and beyond time, and that wonder, above all, is a treasure worth seeking. Gimli's tale reminds us that courage is not only in deeds of war, but in the willingness to embrace friendship, to honor beauty, and to journey into the unknown with hope in our hearts. And so the last of the Fellowship found his rest, not beneath the stone of a tomb, but among the shining shores and silver-lit trees of Aman. A dwarf, a friend, a bridge between worlds. Gimli, son of Glóin, carried the legacy of the Fellowship to its final horizon, a story of reconciliation, awe, and quiet heroism. Gimli's story reminds us that even the smallest bonds can reshape history. If you want more journeys beyond Middle-earth, click here for our next lore deep dive.